Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Many of us struggle with sales, whether it's from confidence, comfort, and just not wanting to be salesy. We want to help our customers. We know we can, but we complicate the process. This podcast is designed to help professionals like you improve at sales through process, practice, frameworks, and thinking differently about what you already know. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and with us is the founder of Catalyst Sale, Mike Simmons. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Jody.
All right, Mike, I've been watching you on LinkedIn, or as some people might say, the LinkedIn, and I noticed you've been playing a lot more golf lately.
I have been playing a lot more golf lately.
Is that because you just enjoy hot weather?
I do enjoy hot weather. I live in Arizona for a reason. I think it's a great place to be. I'm looking forward to cooling down. We had a little bit of a break this last week, but now you know what it is we watched the match where Tiger and Phil and Tom Brady and Peyton Manning had played on TV, and it was really early on in the lockdown. And that turned into Andrew and I going out and playing. So Andrew's our youngest. Andrew and I going out and playing. And then we started playing a little bit more consistently. Then Sean came out and played. My brother started playing with us. And it just turned into something that we're doing a lot more of. And it's been a great way to pass some of the time. Golf courses out here in Arizona are still open, and they've been open throughout the various phases of lockdown.
Well, we've talked about golf and sales on a previous episode, but maybe it's worth revisiting now that you're playing a lot.
Yeah, and that episode, we talked about it. It was right after Andrew got a hole-in-one, almost a year ago. He had a hole-in-one on, I believe it was the 13th hole, a 75-yard hole at one of the local courses here. And yeah, so I think it's an awesome thing to talk about.
All right. And I'm going to ask this, and then we'll get on to the topic. Have you gotten a hole-in-one yet?
Only in putt-putt.
Well, you take what you can get.
You do.
Yeah. Okay. So golf and sales, is there anything new now that, well, since then you've recorded a lot more podcast episodes, you've played a lot more golf, any new ideas to connect the two?
Well, I think I went through a phase where, after we had kids, stopped playing golf and would play maybe once a year for an extended period of time, and never really, I'd get frustrated with my game. I never really got too frustrated though, because I just didn't put the time or effort into getting better. And then over the course of about the last 6 weeks, I've been playing more, and I've realized that there's this, it's similar to that whole, unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. This whole progression as you learn things. And I think in the first phase of getting back into it, really thought that I played better than my capabilities. So I was just out there just trying to muscle the ball around and hit the ball long and far, and then get up to wherever it is and go hit it again, and then get up to wherever it is and then go hit it again. And then I went through this period of saying, okay, well, there's a math problem. You've got par. And I know, whether you're a golfer or you're not a golfer, hopefully some of this stuff starts to make sense. Par is the number of shots it should take for you to complete a hole. And a par 3 might be a short hole. The expectation is you're going to hit your tee shot onto the green, and it will take 2 putts from there to get in the hole. And then you would par that hole. On a par 4, you would take 2 shots to get to the green, 2 putts, and you'd par that hole. And they have par in putt-putt. We've seen it. We've talked before about how Jody beat me the last time we played each other, the only time we played each other, but I will have my redemption at some point in time. But there's a design-oriented approach you can take to the game, where if you work backwards and say, it's going to take 2 putts, then where does my approach shot need to be to give me a chance at making those 2 shots? And then how do I work backward from that approach shot to the tee shot? And you can start to apply some interesting math to it. Now, anybody who's played the game knows that you can apply math, but then when you actually swing the club and hit the ball, you have no control over where that ball goes. I mean, once it leaves the club head face, and it's only on the club head face for a very, very short period of time. Once it leaves the club head face, you've got no control. The wind plays into it. Humidity plays into it. Heat plays into it. How thick the grass is plays into it. What you end up hitting when you land, whether it's a cart path. I had a shot yesterday that hit the curb of a cart path and took a very interesting bounce. There's just so many things that can happen. after you've done the work, you've got to let the outcome, you've got to be okay with the idea that the outcome is just going to be the outcome.
I won't bring up our miniature golf. That we'll just say that, that happened and now we're ready for the next one. But golf itself, I have not played in quite a while, twice only since I moved to the state of Washington. But I have to say, watching your posts and then the extra messages you've been sending me about it and hearing you talk about it here makes me want to play again, because there's some, I've been thinking a lot about the connections to it since we last talked about it. And you're right. There's some things you can control. There are some things you can't. There's how your mindset plays into it. There's your preparation. And you've told me previously that that's all you can do. You prepare, and then when you actually go to play, you shouldn't have to think about it. And I guess that's the same, right? When it comes to sales, you do all your prep work. That way, when you're in front of somebody, when you're with somebody, you don't really think about it. You do what you've prepared to do.
Yeah, I mean, and there should obviously be thought in the way that you approach things. You're going to take information. You've got input. So you hit the golf ball. You're not thinking about it in the swing, but you make contact. You hit the golf ball, and then as you walk up and take your next shot, you're thinking about what you want to do with this next shot to get you to the shot that will follow. What's going to put you in the best position? So you're going to. There's a time and a place for thinking, I think, is the way to look at it. And the more prepared you are as you go through this process, the higher likelihood you are going to have better outcomes. Meaning, if you spend time at the practice tee in the range, working on chipping and working on putting, then when you get into the operating environment, when you go chip or putt, the likelihood that you're going to be more successful, the likelihood that you'll have more confidence in your capability starts to increase. What's the quote? Chance favors the prepared mind. So you go through this process of creating opportunities for you to be successful. And this is why planning is so important in all of the work that we do. If you go into a meeting, whether it's with a customer or an internal customer or an external customer, if you go into that meeting and you're not aware of who's going to be in the room, you haven't taken the time to anticipate what their objectives are. You haven't taken the time to think about what your objectives are. You haven't taken the time to clarify what your desired next steps are, not necessarily sharing that with the person on the other end, just your own documentation. The likelihood that you're going to miss, or the likelihood that risk increases that you might miss out on an opportunity in that call starts to increase. There are absolutely direct correlations that you can draw between sports and the business world, cooking and the business world. We've talked about in the context before about driving a car, going and picking up eggs and using that as a way to talk about process. So many of these things are related primarily because in any of these interactions, we're dealing with human beings. We're dealing with human beings who behave in one way, shape or another, who are unpredictable, who can be influenced by outside perspectives. Let's say you're going and you're meeting with a client, and on the way to that meeting, so let's say they're working from home. On the way to that meeting, they spilled coffee all over their desk and they just ruined a set of papers. And you have no idea that happened. But now you get on a call with them and something's just wrong. Something's off. The vibe just isn't there. If you take the process of asking questions, if you observe the situation, if you see how things have changed, you can likely adapt or iterate to the information that's been given to you. If you're not aware of those things, if you're not paying attention to the nonverbal, if you're not asking questions, if you're not noticing that things have changed, you take on a high level of risk that you're going to stay focused on your own agenda and have some miscues. You're going to ask the wrong question at the wrong time, and it's going to lead into some ugly things. And, on the golf course, thinking about how you're swinging the golf club is not a good thing. And it takes all these fine motor skills to make good, solid contact. If when I'm going and swinging that golf club, if I'm thinking, all right, keep my left arm straight, transfer my weight to my right foot, transfer my weight back to my left foot before I begin my downswing, make sure I don't hit it in the water on the right, stay out of the trees on the left. All of a sudden, I've got so many different things that are going on in my mind. The likelihood that I'm going to be successful in making contact with that ball in the way that I intend to decreases significantly.
So when I was a park ranger, I was a law enforcement ranger, and we did a lot of firearms training. And
Sure.
there was one story instructors would tell. Now, I have never looked this up, so I can't I can't tell you the year, I can't tell you anything. I just took their word for it. It was true. So we would never pick up our shell casings, the brass, during firearms practice. So we would shoot for 2 hours and then at the end pick it all up. And one of the stories that they would tell is the reason why they did that. There were 2 officers in Los Angeles that were killed during a gunfight, and they found in their investigation that this was back when they used revolvers. They fired all the rounds from their revolvers and then picked up the brass, put it in their pocket, and then reloaded, because that's how they trained. So when when they were in a situation, they fell back to exactly how they were trained. They did, because there was no time to think it through. And yes, you can say, well, that doesn't make sense to pick up your shells and put them in your pocket, but that's how they were trained to do it. So the entire time I was a ranger, that's how we trained. You just shot everything and you never once worried about where it went. And then afterwards, you just picked it up.
Yeah. I mean, and there's so many different connections that you can draw there. Things in special operations. I mean, we've had a couple of folks on the podcast before. I think we've talked about this in one way, shape, or form before as well, but slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And, as you go through these things, if you're training in that slow, methodical, muscle memory kind of mode, you will start to increase your ability to execute in a defined period of time. And one of the things to talk about in golf, the importance of clubhead speed. And clubhead speed is not a function of how fast can I move my hands down from the top of the swing. It's how fast can I move my body in this lever through time and space. So yeah, I think whether you're chopping vegetables or you're swinging a golf club or you're practicing working with firearms, there's value in being intentional about the way you practice. And then there's also value in allowing or in just trusting the process when those fine motor skills need to be called into action.
And so let's look at that. When it comes to sales, to talk about how that applies.
Well, think about a scenario where you do some call planning and maybe even do a role play scenario. And the highlight of the role play scenario, many times when someone is judging a role play scenario, what they will tend to focus on is how do you deliver feature functionality information to the customer? How well do you stay on brand? How well do you highlight the points of whatever the product does, like the minute details? Because many times the person who's judging that may be on the product side of the equation. They might be in a leadership role where they're not actually working with customers as much anymore. So they feel like the expertise that they can deliver is based on functional movements, functional information that's delivered, functional areas of expertise. I would actually challenge you to go through and say, what are the scenarios where people miss? What are the missed opportunities that your sales team have when they're interacting with customers? Many times the things that we miss is we forget to ask important questions that understand business impact inside those organizations. Ask effective questions to understand the actual problem that we're solving for. We tend to spend more time talking rather than asking questions and getting information back. So when you go through these role play scenarios, test yourself in that exercise. Test yourself around reflective listening. See if your team can actually ask follow-up questions based on the information that's shared rather than just jumping in and starting to agree with the point that the customer said. By agreeing with the point the customer said, you might nail it and you might get them to the point where they say, okay, yep, you heard what I said and you're agreeing with it. By asking a question and building a little bit further, you're demonstrating a level of interest in wanting to understand things a bit further. Now, that doesn't mean turn it into a 20-question discussion. I mean, there's a balance here. When you're going through and doing this role play scenario inside your organization, try to be as close to the accurate scenario that you would expect your team to have when they're engaging with their customers. And I know that's dependent on calls. So if we're actually doing a call that's focused on delivering a demo inside an organization or capabilities discussion, then you're going to get into the fine details around what's important and how can I ask some questions to drive some additional engagement? But if you're role playing a discovery call, the focus should be on the type of listening that happens, the type of questions that happen, and how the rep actually navigates time.
This idea of role plays is such a good one. It's how it applies to golf too. Since we're connecting the two, Mike, if he's in his backyard putting, that's the same as a sales professional going through role plays and simulating calls, because you don't want to try those out for the first time when you're live with a prospect. Just like Mike doesn't want to putt for the first time when he's out on the golf course. And also it's those reps over and over that make Mike good at golfing. It's what makes Mike good at sales. So Mike, I really enjoy this idea of role plays, and that's how you get preparation. And if you fall back to your highest level of preparation, well, this is how you get there.
Well, I never said I was good at golf. I am working on getting better, and I aspire. And my goal is just like Drucker would tell us, what gets measured gets managed. You keep track of these scores and you keep track of the activity, you can start to figure out where your opportunities are. I mean, one of the things that so think about in the context of sales. So the majority of calls that an account executive might have that help get a deal moving in the right direction, really important call, is a discovery call. That initial research where we're gathering a little bit of information from the customer, we're trying to build a high level of rapport, we're building up trust, we maybe are sharing information. Make sure you're practicing those. Just like we're talking about in golf, I was reading the other day that 30% of the strokes that you might take in a round come on the putting green. You know, let's say you're a bad putter and maybe 40% of the strokes are on the putting green, or maybe you're a really good putter and that math works out. But practice in those areas where you've got an opportunity to score, where you've got an opportunity to win, where you've got an opportunity to demonstrate success. And if you're struggling with chipping and putting and scoring around the green, spend more time there. Yet if you go to, and Bob Rotella talks about this in his book, and he's got a couple of good ones. He's got one on champions mindset and another one on golf is not a game of perfect. If you go to any practice facility or driving range, you'll see the majority of people are out there just hitting driver or hitting long irons, and the practice green, the chipping area, is empty. If you take the time and focus in that practice area where you would spend most of your time on the course, your game will improve significantly. And that's where I'm actually seeing the biggest impact. You've just got to be really thoughtful about how you approach things.
Yeah. This is a great conversation, Mike. And I look forward to seeing where your golf game goes. Perhaps we come back for this after you have a milestone like, well, I don't know. I don't know what your next milestone would be, but maybe we'll talk about it again. And of course, we'll have to talk about it again when we finally have that miniature golf rematch. I don't know if you and I should ever have a real golf showdown, because it would not be pretty.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be pretty. My next milestone is to break 90. And I've not broken 90 since I've taken the game back up again. So that's my next major milestone, is to break 90. And if everything goes right, then the next one beyond that is to break 80 by the end of the year, which some people have told me I'm absolutely crazy to think that that's too aggressive of a goal, but you got to have aggressive goals.
Yeah, you do. If you're shooting for breaking 80 and you get down to 85, well, you're still better than you were without that aggressive goal.
That's right.
That's right. All right, Mike, thank you so much for a great conversation, and thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.